Hello, this is Dr. Culkin, once again here to talk about the major points of the reading for Topic 3, Part B, which addresses the buildup and effect of the Civil War. Please note that we are not going to address the battles of the Civil War at length, but if that is of interest to you, I'm happy to point you to relevant material. As you know from earlier reading, tensions between the North and the South had been building for decades. In 1857, they were ratcheted up again through the Supreme Court decision in the Dred Scott case. In response to a case involving a slave, Dred Scott, suing for freedom because he lived in a free territory, the court ruled that a slave could not sue because he was not a citizen. The court ruled further that Congress had no right to prohibit slavery in any of the territories, thus undermining the constitutionality of the Missouri Compromise. The ruling horrified many people in the North. Even those who were not ardent abolitionists were concerned about the growing influence of slave power South in government, and over the rest of the country. The decision especially energized the recently formed Republican Party, which had emerged as a home for those against the expansion of slavery to Nebraska and Kansas. The presidential election of 1860 brought the tensions to a head. 4 candidates ended up running, with Lincoln chosen as the Republican candidate. With the Democratic Party split in two, Lincoln won by a huge margin, even though he didn't appear on ballots in the South. It is important to remember that Lincoln ran on a platform to stop the expansion of slavery, not to abolish it entirely. Despite this, many people in southern states were greatly concerned by his victory, in part because he won without even appearing on southern ballots, meaning they really had absolutely no influence on him or presidential politics for that particular moment in time. On December 20th, South Carolina seceded, with 6 more states following by February. With Lincoln refusing to compromise on the extension of slavery, tensions rose up even further, and the first shots of the Civil War were fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina on April 12, 1861. 11 states made up the Confederacy, which established its headquarters in Richmond, Virginia. 4 states in which slavery was legal, all of which bordered the North, stayed within the Union. Although slavery was clearly at the heart of the conflict, the war was initially framed as one over whether the Union could and should be split apart. Lincoln was eventually driven to make abolition central to the war effort by political pressure from the North, the desire to strike a blow against the Southern economic system, and the desire to attract sympathy and support from England and France. The Emancipation Proclamation, issued January 1st, 1863, freed all slaves living in states which had seceded, who of course wouldn't really be following Lincoln's orders at this point, but it didn't free those slaves who lived in states which had stayed within the Union, the border states. So in the short term, it really freed no one, but it did commit the North to ending slavery as an explicit war aim, which was very important to the abolitionists. The war opened up new roles in society too, and to some extent changed the status of African Americans and women. Over 200,000 African Americans served in the Union Army. Then on January 31st, 1864, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution was approved, which made slavery illegal. Northern women became involved in work that went beyond traditional female roles, including serving on the front lines as nurses and raising money. These jobs were accepted because the women were considered to be sacrificing for their country. But this work also changed notions of what women were capable of, and those ideas stayed after the war. In the South, women had to take over the running of the farms as their husbands and fathers went off to battle. And after the war, the Southern economy crushed by the conflict, many women took jobs such as teaching. The Confederate Army surrendered on April 9, 1865, almost 4 years to the day after the war had begun. Over 600,000 American soldiers were dead, because remember, people who died on either side were Americans. The South was physically and economically devastated by the conflict, including the destructive march taken by General Sherman. And the country needed to figure out how to forge an economic system without slavery and create a place as citizens for the 4 million Americans who had been freed from bondage. Okay, that's it for this week. Make sure to answer the reading questions and participate in the discussion board, and contact me if you have any questions.